Hope everyone had a good lunch and is raring to go. We've got a really exciting, everyone says that, doesn't know that, but I really do mean it, because it's actually about how you change cultures and how do you go from the kind of theoretical, this is important, this matters, to actually making it work and happen. I'm pretty sure we all are in or have heard of or worked in organizations where it's just been quite hard to kind of crack how from top to bottom do we get people to embrace purpose, inclusivity, and sort of values as well. So the way this is going to work, and just to remind everyone, this is all about how do we embed purpose, nurture talent, and empower DEI in our organizations at all levels. We're going to have some opening remarks. I'll introduce everyone in just a second. We are going to have some provocations, as you probably realize at the end. Everyone's going to pose a question to you. We're going to have a discussion on our tables. We're going to get a bit of feedback from different tables to get a sense of what you discussed. Then I'm going to invite our panelists to kind of reflect on what they've heard, and then we'll have some Q&A to round it as well. So it's going to be quite fast-paced. You're going to do a lot of the work as well. We're going to hear some opening sort of statements. I'm Lewis Iwu. I'm one of the co-founders at Purpose Union, where a firm that advises organizations on how to have a positive social impact. But what we love doing is spending our time with peers and people in the sector sort of doing this alongside us. So this really is the highlight of my week. So we're going to start with introducing our panelists. So we have to start off with Laura, who is the Director of Sustainable Futures at Capgemini, works with all sorts of clients in sort of consumer space, retail, energy, financial sectors, and has previously had key roles in the field at M&S and Unilever. Please welcome Laura. We've got Will, who's the founder and MD of Connector, an industry-leading provider of online mentoring services and software. We have Hetty, who's the people lead at City to Sea, as a trained psychotherapist. Is that correct?
I am, but I tend to keep that quiet.
Oh, sorry. I've just outed you, sorry. Chatham House rules, don't put that on there. Apparently you want to keep that quiet. And an experienced wilderness facilitator as well. Thank you very much. Round of applause. We also have Bola, who is Osborne Clark's Head of Responsible Business, and has transformed the business on EDI. It's improved its social mobility index dramatically since she started. I'm sure we'll hear some of that as well. So thank you so much for joining us on our panel. And finally, we've got Beth, who is the Director of Sustainable Leaders, the Chair of Save the Children Corporate Advisory Team. Is that you still the Chair?
Chair of the board, yeah.
Amazing, fantastic. And also Senior Associate at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. So lots of different angles, different views, and everyone's going to have... Sorry. Sat the chair. I'm more important. And just as a reminder, everyone's going to have no more than 7 minutes. So if you hear me abruptly cutting people off, it's because we want to get you an opportunity to have as much time as possible. So we're going to start off. I'm going to start off with Laura, actually, because you're sat in an order which indicates we should do that. So do you want to kick off? 5 to 7 minutes. How do you answer the question of how do we embed all this stuff? Over to you. Do you want to use that microphone? Maybe. This is my microphone.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Does it work?
Okay.
Does it work?
Cool.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's
Got it? Oh, there you go.
okay. How do you embed purpose? I think, it's really interesting from my perspective to kind of reflect back at the journey that purpose had. And for you that have been, maybe involved in this conversation like 10, 15 years ago, when it all started, it was very much the remit of the fortunate few, right? It was an ivory tower kind of conversation. You had a sustainability team or a strategy team kind of defining the direction of travel for the company and then being responsible for essentially driving that. And I think what we've seen in the last decade or so, and it's very, very evident now, is that purpose really has become a democratic concept across the organization. So more and more employees want to get involved, and particularly the younger generation, they want to have a say in it, and they want to have the ability to act in it. So I like to think about purpose as building a movement, building an internal movement, and essentially democratizing it across the entire business. At Capgemini, we like to think about embedding purpose across different dimensions. So if you think about your operating model, right, you need to think about people, processes, governance, data, and technology. I think when it comes to people, there's really a critical question about what are the kinds of skills that you need today, but also what kind of skills you will need in the future. It's really interesting to observe how the conversation on skills has evolved through the years. It started very much, with innovation, with a focus on innovation skills, strategy skills. Now, what I see across my clients is the need for sustainability and business skills. So really, I think the conversation on skills really kind of evolved. And now there's more and more emphasis also on the soft skills. So because the purpose transition for mature businesses is such an emotional challenge, right? I mean, for some organizations, it's really about degrowth. It's really about going against their current business model. There are really intense and sometimes emotional conversations and stakeholders that sustainability practitioners need to deal with. So there's an increase of emphasis, I think, on soft skills and emotional intelligence and so on. The other really interesting element is, I think, data and technology. If you don't have the right data and if you don't have the right technology to basically put that data in the hands of your employees, then they can't make better decisions. And many times the middle management is kind of stuck with a bunch of KPIs that they can't really deliver against because either they don't have the understanding, and that comes back to the skills, or they don't have the means to make better decisions. So I think for me, there are a couple of critical questions if you want to think about those. First of all, is your purpose clear enough and actionable enough for the entire organization to get behind, right? So in my experience in Unilever, we had this really beautiful purpose around making sustainable living commonplace. And then we've done workshops with the brand owners and with the business owners, and at a certain point with each and every employee to translate what that purpose statement meant for the business and for their own, for them as individuals. And at a certain point, you had, people working in brands like Hellmann's that's fighting against food waste, coming up and saying, so what do you do every day? I fight food waste, right? Isn't that amazing? So translating purpose for the employees, I think it's really important. And then secondly, think about what is the level of your ambition when you talk purpose? Is it about driving compliance, or are you really looking to shift your business model? And be very clear when it comes to that. And last but not least, do you really know what skills will be required today for your organization's sustainability transition, and how do you think those skills will evolve in the future given the path and trajectory you're on? So that would be me. Did I make it in 7 minutes? Just out of curiosity.
It was well timed.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Set dangerous precedent. Thank you. Well done. Will, same question to you.
Fabulous. Have I got Laura's spare 3 minutes? No, I don't. So I'm Will. I'm from Connector. And just to give you a tiny bit of context, I'm the founder and MD. We're a team of 40 people, social enterprise, and primarily we support young people prepare for work whilst they're in education to get into a job and then to do well in that job. So quite a long life cycle. And as part of that, the insights I want to share are those of our clients who are large employers. You would know them all, cross-sector, whether it's Vodafone, Lloyds Bank, GSK. They are all interested in engaging with young people, especially those from disadvantaged or underrepresented backgrounds, and hiring some of those and then developing them into successful parts of their teams. Anyway, what I would love to share with you is, I think, just something unbelievably exciting. And that is, so as part of my job, I chat with our clients. And about 9 months ago, I was chatting with a US bank and talking about their priorities for young people. And number 2 was preparing young people for green jobs of the future. And I played it really cool. I just said, oh, of course, of course. Inside, I was thinking, US bank, this is number 2 priority. I couldn't believe it. And I took that away, slightly stunned, and it was a bit like when I remember I bought a purple jumper once. I thought I was the only one with a purple jumper. But then for the next week and month, I kept talking to more of our clients, and they were all saying the same things, that in 2022 they'd hired their global head of sustainability, or they're putting enormous infrastructure, and now they're workforce planning. And of course that means reskilling large parts of their workforce for green future, to hit net zero government legislations, but also what it means is planning for the future workforce. And the messages were that this is going to be a bit like the tech skills gap that's coming. There's going to be a green skills gap that's coming. We're well connected in this space, so I spoke with the education side of this equation, the careers and enterprise company, government, awarding bodies, schools. And there's a gap. Schools aren't ready. No one's ready. There's a lot of sitting on the sidelines waiting for government to act, which will then unlock lots of other actions. But right now, young people, teachers are not talking about green careers. So I saw an opportunity. I brought together, I hate the word coalition, I've called it a coalition, brought together a group of both sides of that equation as well as government. And there is enormous appetite to bridge that gap. And I think this plays in perfectly to the brief, in that we are engaging with our community, preparing young people for future works. Let's face it, without the skills, we're not going to hit net zero. So it's absolutely imperative, and that plays to values. And then from an employer point of view, we worked with coalition members, half a dozen, and built a business case. And it was not hard. I'm going to read a few. But 72% of young people, not young people, 72% of people in education aim to work for a company that supports sustainability, and they're happy to take a pay cut for it. That generation currently in education are going to choose the companies they work for very carefully, and it's going to be around sustainability and values. So for an employer, if you're not doing that, you are going to miss out on talent, even if it's not a direct green job. To be seen as a credible leader. So existing employees are looking for leadership in this space, and what better way to have volunteer opportunities and for the whole company to see we're engaging the workforce of the future around this issue. Growing customer loyalty, of course, customers are demanding action, and this is part of it. Volunteering opportunities and strengthening retention and values, as well as improving local community approval. I could go on and on. But my challenge to you is, I think this is so good that every organisation can activate a plan here. But it requires quite a lot of internal stakeholder buy-in. If your organisation wants to engage with the community around green skills, green jobs of the future, that could be HR, it could be comms, it could be... So my challenge to you is draw an internal stakeholder map of who the people you'd have to get buy-in from to actually take this from a nice thought to an action.
Round of applause. Thank you very much, Will. I've been very bad before I introduce our next speaker. I haven't reminded everyone, if you do have any views on any of the content you're hearing, we do have a hashtag called #PurposeSummit23, and that I think works on X and Threads. I think is what, no one uses Threads. What am I talking about? I think it's for X as well. So if you are inclined to talk about this and the content of this session, do tweet. Hetty, over to you.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you. Can you hear me if I speak from here, or do I have to? Do you want to hold it? Yeah. Oh. Okay. Is that better? Okay. So I'm Hetty. I'm the people lead from City to Sea. It's not very often that my role gets actually out and about, so I'm very excited to be here. As you said, I have various different incarnations and different roles that have led me to this. But essentially what inspires me about my role for City to Sea is that it's the psychology of the business place. It's really about people. And we were talking earlier on about essential people that should be in partnership meetings, and often I feel it's me. my role, not me personally, but it's the people person in the organisation. I think they're really crucial. So a bit about City to Sea. We're a campaigning organisation. We campaign against single-use plastic, the most polluting items. As you probably know, there are 8.2 billion metric tons of plastic in existence globally, of which only about 9% have ever been recycled. And that's set to double, and by 2050 to quadruple. So this problem is not going away. We're a tiny team. We're only 17. We've got a big mission on our hands. And so we have to be ambitious, and that word has come up, echoed throughout the day, woven into lots of speakers and conversations. Ambition is absolutely crucial. And we're purpose-led by nature. So it's nice to be on this panel. So my role in City to Sea is to make sure that I give the team what they need so that they can go out and do the best job that they can. It's a really clear connection. And before I talk more about the initiatives, which I'm going to talk about our core values, I'm going to talk about our competencies, our approach to inclusion and diversity, our 4-day week, and strategy in nature. I'm going to do it all in 5 minutes. 4 minutes left, very quickly. For me, one of the most inspiring quotes I've heard is by Maya Angelou, an American writer, a civil rights activist, and she realized that it is very likely you'll forget what somebody said. It's very likely you'll forget what somebody did, but you will not forget how somebody made you feel. And that, for me, is absolutely key. It underpins everything. You cannot embed purpose and nurture talent and empower at every level of business unless you have kindness. And it's not just a random act of kindness, which is always a wonderful thing to experience. Actually, what I'm talking about here is intentional kindness. And that is a tricky path to go down. It takes work, it takes commitment, it takes joined up thinking, it takes thoughtful leadership, it takes follow through, and it takes benchmarking. So intentional kindness is, for me, what is the absolute key to embedding this systemic change for the better in your organisation. And I mentioned values, so we have our core values. And if you meet anybody from City to Sea, Jane's in the room, our head of development. Hello, Jane. Hopefully you realise that we're brave, that we're earth kind, that we're positive, that we're balanced. And another one that I can't remember. Core values, 5 of them. But playful. Hopefully you realise that we're playful and creative. And we should show up like that anywhere that we are. And we have a competency framework in our organisation. It's the granular thing that holds the organisation together, and it gives parity, and it gives a developmental and learning tool for everybody, and it gives a common language. And I've seen that to be truly transformational. It's not academic, it's part of our everyday. And I can talk to you more about that if anyone is interested to ask me after. And we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're a 4-day week organisation, and that hasn't been an easy transition. We were a very early adopter, but what we're showing by that is that we're challenging and looking in the eye the blaze and burn culture that got us to this place in the beginning. And we're saying, no, we want people to have a balanced work-life relationship. So therefore, we're a 4-day week organisation, but we're still evolving that, and it's not a full stop. It's a journey. And then finally, strategy in nature. These are our team days. We go out in the wild, and they are quite wild, the team days. In those moments, we usually have an overnight. And we connect with our mission and our cause, with waterways, with land, and we vision together. And it's a truly wonderful thing, and it's something we're developing for other organisations as well. And I think I will leave it there. Basically, for me, ambition and intentional kindness is key. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next up, we've got Bola.
From the law firm, which is going to seem really exciting after that. Thanks, I'm now really glad I sat next to you, Hetty. So when I heard the question, how to embed purpose, I kind of thought, oh, that's a really difficult question, isn't it, in 5 minutes? But actually, I went from asking how to thinking, well, the way I do it is I start with the why. You know, why for the organisation. Sorry, I have to use these to read, but as soon as I look up, I kind of like feel as though I'm swimming. You know, why for the organisation, why for your key stakeholders, and then the kind of the third point I think is worth talking about is how do you then maintain it? So on the why for the organisation, why on earth does your organisation want to be purpose-driven? And you have to be able to answer that, because that is what you will essentially have to be kind of addressing in whatever strategy you put together. And also the whys will change, which means that you have to adapt with them. So for example, take the banking crisis of 2008. Some of us will remember that quite clearly. A number of banks had been, I would call it now, looking back, tinkering with purpose and tinkering with responsibility. And then suddenly the public turned around and kind of said, well, what are you for? What is your purpose here? And actually a lot of banks, and Lloyds Bank was one of the first banks I think that did that really well, nothing to do with the fact that I was there, but one of the banks that did that really, really well. And you know, the chief exec kind of said, we need to really think about sustainability. We need to think about this across the whole business. I want to be aggressive. I want to be ambitious, etc. So the why for that organization was actually very externally driven. It was driven by the need for brand recognition. And so you then have to think about, well, how do you build a strategy that addresses that why? Because that's all the organization's thinking about at that point in time. And if you can align your why, then that's how you get people to buy in to what it is you're trying to do. So at OC, sorry, we call it OC, but don't tell anyone inside OC I said that. At OC, the why was driven by two things. One, personal commitment. So a lot of the partners were personally committed to things that would fall within the purpose space. But also a lot of client activity. So clients were suddenly starting to ask, well, what are you doing on net zero? What are you doing in terms of community engagement on D&I, etc.? So the why was actually twofold. And that's why, you know, my strategy, for example, an element of it, you know, from a business point of view, we're interested in digitalization. From a social impact point of view, we were thinking about poverty. So actually, one strand of our strategy is around digital poverty because it directly links to your business strategy. And for some people, that's really, really critical. The other really important thing about understanding the why is that if you really build it in, people will get it. So it goes beyond the reason why you started in the first place. Because when the original why falls away, banks start making profit, people, you know, 2008 fades into the distance. It's really difficult for a business to turn around and do something different. So understanding the why at an organizational level, I think, is really, really critical. The second piece is about understanding the why at the individual level. And I always kind of go back to this idea of people being driven by their heads, hearts, or pockets, or some sort of combination of those three things. And in order to really embed any of what you're doing, you have to kind of entice people, hook them in, get them into to that place where they can actually understand that it doesn't matter why they're doing it. It's actually the right thing to do. It's a great thing to do. It's good for the business. It's good for them. It's good for communities. It's win-win all round. So again, if we think about, you know, those people who are really motivated by the head, you know, for us, this is around kind of making it entirely logical. So for some businesses, that's about understanding what your regulatory requirements are. So that makes perfect sense. You've got to do this, because if you don't do this, you're going to get into trouble. Or you've got to do this because actually, you know, your clients are asking you to do this. And in a commercial law firm, you know, clients are king. And so that kind of links a lot with the head and the pocket. It just makes sense, regardless of what you feel personally. And for those, I think, who are led by the heart, I actually think that they're the hardest ones, because in many ways, they just kind of go, well, I'm going to do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. And you're like, well, yeah, that's great as a leader, but what happens when the next leader comes in and they don't think that it's the right thing to do? So in many ways, you've got to educate those who are driven by the heart so that they better understand why they're doing it. And I think, for example, the training that Unilever did to make sure everyone understood the broader concept of why it becomes really, really important. At OC, this is about our leadership development courses when it comes to diversity and inclusion. It's about the carbon literacy training that we're rolling out so that people really understand that, yes, it's great that you think it's the right thing to do, but there are all these other reasons that are really important for the business. And then the last thing I think that is important to just say is all of this always changes. So we have got to be adaptable and we've got to evolve as the whys evolve from the business. So something to keep in mind. And so I guess my kind of leave for you to discuss is, what is your why? And how are you designing and developing whatever it is you do in order to address that?
Thank you very much, Bola. And last but not least, in terms of the opening statements, Beth, round of applause.
Thank you. Wow. Oh my gosh, the pressure of going last. I'd like to ask you to do something a little bit differently with me, because everything that this wonderful group of humans have said, and Maya Angelou and the Phenomenal Woman poem is one of my favourites as well. I'd like to ask you all to put your devices down and stand up for a second with me. Please, post-lunch. Triglyceride dip, everybody, let's get up. I'd like you to close your eyes, if you're brave enough. Now, I'd like you to imagine a string from the ceiling coming down into your head, travelling through your body, grounding into the floor. I'd like you to wiggle your toes within your shoes and ground yourself on the floor. Now, I'd like you to think about when you woke up this morning and the millions of decisions that you have made between then and now. I would like you to think about the product that you took off the shelf to spray on your hair, to brush your teeth with, the scent that you put on your body. I'd like you to think about the choices that you made when you picked out the clothing to wear, to put on your back, the jewelry to adorn your body, the device that you put in your pocket or your handbag. All those choices that you made to represent the person that you are, the values that you hold, and what you stand for. Thank you. Open your eyes and sit back down again. You made a lot of decisions today already to represent who you are as a person and what you stand for. A lot of those decisions that you made will have been unconsciously done. You won't have thought about them. You would have picked that toothbrush and the toothpaste brand off your bathroom shelf, and you may have been ordering exactly the same brand unwittingly for the last 3, 5, 10 years of your life. How many of those decisions were consciously made? And how many of those did you identify and bring back to your purpose and your reason for being? Now amplify that out into an organizational context. Think about the decisions that leaders need to make on a day-to-day basis to be purposeful in how they show up, what they represent, what they stand for, and what they enable and devolve the accountability into their organizations in order to empower their people to do the same. This stuff is not easy. We are all infallibly human. And every decision that we make today, was it the most sustainable decision that we could have possibly made? Probably not. We're all imperfectly perfect humans. And so what is the role of purpose in that context? What is the reason for being? Now, 8 years ago, I was the head of strategy at a purpose-led business think tank that got founded by Ernst & Young at the time. And we were writing lots of thought leadership, and we were producing diagnostics tools, and we were we had board breakfasts at Davos and all sorts of interesting conversations going on around these things. But consistently what it boiled down to was a combination of two things. There was always one group of individuals who were motivated by wanting to do the right thing, a sense of purpose, a sense of self. And I'm going to assume maybe that the majority of this group will fall into that category by the fact that you were attracted to something called a Purpose Summit. And then the other group that were curious about the conversation, saw that there was a groundswell of activity around this sort of thing, like green jobs, like other people that cared about this stuff, and therefore I should be listening, I should be caring about it. And a group of people who were engaging with a lot of the thought leadership and diagnostic tools, but using it in order to build reputation and build brand, and not doing that deeper thinking. So it became ingrained and values-led on a day-to-day basis with the decisions that these leaders were making. We're now in a very different world from then. You know, we are living through volatile, uncertain times. VUCA, you might have heard that acronym. Polycrisis is another popular term that's gaining traction. Like no generation before us, we are dealing with climate change, cost of living crisis, political instability, war, rising inequality, unfortunately, and post-pandemic, social mobility is retrenching and going backwards. It's now taking, I believe the statistic is 3 generations in London to get from on the poverty line to middle class. And if you live in a rural community in this country, it's 5 generations, which is quite terrifying. These are scary statistics that I really think our government and civil society need to be aware of and be doing more on. And so how does this translate into an organisational context? Now, there's some interesting research that's coming forward around this. You might have seen an article recently in the Financial Times that a lot of the sustainable funds or sustainable ESG funds are starting to drop the word sustainable from in front of their funds because they're beginning to be audited. People are beginning to call bullshit on that group of individuals that were using this rhetoric around purpose, around eco, around ESG, etc., to make money. And I'm pleased about that because I think that means that those that are winning out are those that are showing integrity in that conversation. But I think that what that means for us, and what that means for all of us, is that we now have to think about how we engage thoughtfully with those organisations that want to have strong environmental, social, governance, diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever label you put on it, doing good business well, in a way that is truly purposeful and purpose-led in how they show up, in the decisions that they make, both consciously and unconsciously, so that that can really translate not just into what they say, but what they do. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that that feels pretty good when it all comes together. So that's my provocation, and I'd love to go a bit deeper with you all on it.
I remember to start the clap this time. So you've heard 5 opening statements with provocations. So what we're going to do is take 10 minutes on your table to have a discussion, pick which of those questions you want to tackle.
I didn't manage to give my...
Yeah, no, I was going to give everyone a chance to re-start the question.
Okay.
And if you could appoint a spokesperson or spokespeople who will then feed back to the room. We'll then have a response from the panel and then Q&A. So you've got about 10 minutes in your group. We'll do a quick recce round just to go through the questions in case you've forgotten again. We're going to start. Laura, do you want to give your question again?
Oh, sorry, guys, I have 3 questions. So is your purpose sharp and clear enough in order for every employee to get involved? What is the level of your ambition? Compliance versus transformation, and do you have a perspective on the skills that you need today as well as the roadmap for the future?
Preparing young people currently in education for green skills of the future is an incredible vehicle to hit all of these metrics up on the screen here for your organisation. But to pull it off, you're going to have to engage with the right stakeholders in your organisation. And that is not easy because it's multiple stakeholders. So what is that stakeholder map?
Thank you. In 1 year's time, if you were to be embedding employee kindness into your business formula, amplifying that, what would you be doing differently? How would your business look?
Mine was, what is a why for your business or sector or your stakeholders? And how have you or how could you shape your strategy to really ensure it's weaved into and embedded into the fabric of your organisation?
Beautiful. No, it makes sense. How can you use your purpose, your reason for being, to navigate complexity and polycrisis? How can you mindfully engage or put accountability mechanisms in place to help you with all of those unconscious, maybe now you're a bit more conscious of them, your decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis?
Really? I think there's probably about 20 questions there, but look,
Too many.
something to get your teeth stuck into. You've got 10 minutes.
Take the question that's interesting and leave the rest, right?
Okay, everyone. Thanks very much. So, if I could get the panelists to come back to their places. What we're going to do is just ominously hover around and pick on tables to just give a brief overview of what you discussed, what types of issues you grappled with. So why not this table? Right in front of me, who wants to... You're scribing away furiously. So do you want to... Yeah, brilliant. And do you want to introduce yourself to the room and who you are? So it feels like a stand-up comedy show. I'm like picking on you. I mean, no. How are you? How are you today? Good? Brilliant.
I'm very good today, thank you. Hi there, my name's Lee Smith and I'm the founder of Impact Match, which is a company that helps to resolve crisis in the world by putting great people in touch with great people to create more social impact. It's not very difficult, but yeah, and I do lots of things and I specialise in digital inclusion, I guess. So, and thank you so much for the panellists, of which I know those two amazing ladies really well, and the fact that you both sat together is filling my heart with much joy. So, if this is the first time you've met, like, you're going to have a great relationship. Anyway, yeah, so we had a really good conversation. We assumed that we found actually lots of correlation between all questions, and they overlapped in terms of our answers. So I'll try and give you a general summary, and they were all really good questions. And please feel free, team, to butt in if I've got this wrong. But essentially we were saying that to answer all of those questions, you need a purpose-led strategy, which is co-designed from the top and the bottom. And you gave a great example of where there's a shadow board of people less than the age of 35 that help co-create strategy, so it's bottom up and top down. And the North Star is decided together, and that's with the board. So the why is felt throughout the organisation, whether it's in accounting in the team, whether it's in a charity that's got it written into its principles. So that kind of smooths the way. And then when challenges come, like I can't even say it, Beth, the polycrisis, yeah, education. Love it. And what we were talking then is, as long as you've got that and it's really firm and it's embedded with understanding, with real case studies, with people who are affected coming to life, and, you know, because everybody learns from stories, and that they really, truly understand it. When that happens, you have to look at what is the impact to your why, and everything comes back to your why and to your North Star. So that then enables you to embed it into your culture, your way of working, and to deliver and keep on that path. But it has to be co-designed, it has to be bottom up and top down, and it has to be feel like it's co-owned within the business. I think that was it. Yeah?
Brilliant.
Okay.
Excellent output. Let's go to this table over here. Who wants to... Yeah, go on. State the name and,
Thank you. Excuse me. So I'm Claire Stafford. I work at EY, used to be called Ernst & Young, so big global consultancy audit organisation, and I work in the corporate responsibility programme in internal communications. So we talked about kindness. That was the one that we kind of opted for. Starting sort of specifically about kindness in a corporate world and the sort of slight discomfort around that, thinking traditionally kindness has been seen as a masculine trait, and No, it's been seen in a feminine way, but how can we bring that kind of masculine energy to that, and how can we make that kind of seem different? We also talked a little bit about competitiveness versus kindness, and that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. How can the two kind of sit together? We talked about sort of kindness as foundational, and psychological safety as part of that. If people feel safe, and how does it give you the freedom to act in a different way with other people as well? And we talked about the pandemic as kind of a trigger for doing that as well. It sort of leveled everybody, it made everybody more accessible, and it brought a natural kindness. So that was a sort of reason for bringing that in as well. And then we also talked about moments in our own career where we've experienced kindness, and maybe it's not been called that, and I'm using the word a lot, but we've felt it even if it hasn't had that label. So how, in feeling that, have we then applied that, and how can we continue to do that when we think about a younger generation, the kindness that we've been shown or that we've experienced? How can we translate that so that the younger generation in work are able to embrace some of these issues that we're grappling with in a way that does bring that kind of more softer energy?
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll have time for just one more before we hand back to the panel. I'll come to the table over here because everyone's head's down. Who wants to go? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, all do add in if you'd like to. Right, we talked a lot. We didn't necessarily come up with any answers, but we talked about we looked first at the whole idea around having a defining your purpose so that it's actionable and clear, and we talked about that is important at an organizational level, but also at an individual level too. So obviously you maybe need to start with the organizational level, and then the individuals can think about what it is that engages them individually, but also as a social cohesion. So a great example from Unilever and Lifebuoy, which I won't go into now, but everybody can get behind a particular direction. Then it can go into a lot more detail by team, by division, and so on and so forth. We thought about how specific that has to be, and does it have, when a lot of organizational purpose statements are very broad platitudes, how useful are they? Should they be more specific, or is it something that everyone can get behind? So that's something to think about too. We also talked about SMEs and the particular challenges of working in an SME where everybody is like really up against it, and there may not be enough time or resources given to really exploring purpose and embedding it in the way everyone would love to. I would love to have talked more about kindness, but I'm glad you guys did as well. We also talked about the psychological safety, I guess, using your words about being able to challenge that purpose. If you're in a meeting and decisions are being made, being able to say, hang on, how does this respond to our purpose? Is this correct? And being able, for the most junior person in the room to feel as safe as saying that as anybody else in the room. That, I think, about is as far as we got. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Lots of solutions. Fantastic. Now, we've had a lot of amazing ideas from that session. And don't worry, at the back, Kenza, give a wave. Kenza's synthesizing all of that. And we'll be distributing sort of an overview of kind of the debate that we've just had. But thank you, huge amount for all that. We're going to go back to the panel. I just want to ask everyone to give a very quick 1 minute kind of just snapshot reaction to what you heard sitting on the tables, and also just some of the feedback we've heard from some of the groups. So maybe this time I'm going to start with Will.
Great. I think I'll pick up on the point that you made. I'm so sorry I missed you, Kate. Around SMEs and having time for purpose. Oh, are you? Okay. It's a great point. So I guess earlier talked about our clients, but just talking about myself, having grown an SME, we're a small team, 45 people, and you're right, we are up against it, and it always seems like we're up against it, with very little slack in the system. But I think values and purpose are what have enabled us to hire good people, retain good people, and deliver good results, because we can't compete in other areas. You know, we're not the highest payers for our developers or any role actually. So I think it is a secret sauce that I've relied on, and it does work. And so maybe that is one of the things you have to kind of do at the expense of some other stuff. But I feel the pain, by the way.
Thank you. Bola, what's your reaction to kind of what you've heard so far?
So my reaction to Will is it doesn't get any easier the bigger you get, by the way. So there are always other distractions within businesses that, you know, make it tricky to embed purpose. So I was sat on this table also talking about kindness, actually, and I thought it was really interesting. We were kind of battling with a couple of things. One, organizations that are delivering what might appear to be purpose-driven things for other organizations, but the classic hairdresser analogy, you know, their hair's a mess, but the client's hair looks amazing. And how do you then kind of turn that mirror back on yourself, really, to make sure that you're walking the talk as well as talking the talk. So that I thought was interesting. And then we were talking about kindness, and I think the thing that struck me is, you know, whether or not the kindness is already there, and we just need to incentivize it, encourage it, recognize it, or actually whether or not the kindness is something that you have to bring in some way or nurture within the organization. And I don't think we resolved that particular question. We didn't, did we? No, we didn't resolve that particular question. But I think it's a really interesting way to think about it. You know, is it actually already there? We're just not doing enough to bring it out.
Hetty, what do you think? What's your reflections from what you've heard?
Yeah, I'm loving that people have picked up and run with the kindness discussion. And I think sometimes it's called other things. It's called inclusion. Or, you know, what is it in your organisation that is kindness? Because it will be there. And I love that question also about the more edgy side of kindness, what we could call the masculine side of kindness. It's a brilliant question. And I think there is a bit of a misconception around kindness is one of those onomatopoeic words. It just sounds so kind. It sounds so soft and lovely. But actually it is, which I think I talked about earlier, it is a really hard path to take, to be consistently kind. And so I think there is an edge there. I really liked what you said about values and giving more junior people a voice in the organisation and how to empower that. And I think the way we do that at City to is we really stand by our values, and so we hold each other account to our values as well. And so anybody in the organisation can say, "Oh, I'm just being balanced right now," or "I'm just being earth kind right now." And so that is something that we find helpful. But so I really liked that inquiry. And then the only other thing I was going to pick up on is I love the idea of a shadow board, an under 35 young person board, to drive purpose and to align and to work with the board. So I think that's something I'd like to take and think about.
Brilliant. And Beth, your reflections so far, what you've heard?
Oh my goodness. Well, I won't repeat what the table debrief, but it was a brilliant conversation and some reflection. I think for me, the intergenerational piece of this is really coming through. So when I first started exploring these conversations around purpose, which was quite some time ago now, pre-pandemic, it was very much a small group of opinion elites in a room in their ivory tower. I think it was Laura's phrase, patting each other on the back and having good chats over a glass of wine. Whereas now I think it's something that all levels of the organisation are engaging with that as a term and really using that as an invitation to, as a critical friend, hold a mirror up to their own actions and their organisation's actions. Now, whether that sustains or not amidst all these crisis moments that we're living through, I think that's the hard piece to evaluate. And being kind for me is not being nice, right? Like sometimes it's tough love, and so you can still make those tough decisions, which might be, you know, closing down parts of the business or stopping producing certain products because they harm the environment, which might then have implications for jobs and livelihoods of people that work for you, etc. These are really hard decisions that businesses are having to make. And you can still be kind in how you communicate that, in how you make those tough decisions, etc. It's not necessarily synonymous with sacrifice either, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Laura, final reflections before we move to the Q&A?
Sure. I just wanted to emphasize this concept that I think it's really important around purpose, which is authenticity. And I think that the role of purpose, and this kind of dials into the conversation we had here around how do we find time for purpose, you know, what's the right way of phrasing purpose. I think...
I don't know why it's making a very weird noise. Like to me.
I think, I think the role of purpose is really to kind of bring to life what is within the company anyway, right? So it needs to be an authentic expression of a group of people, if it's a smaller organization, or, you know, the founding values or the founding reasons if it's a larger organization. But it definitely needs to be anchored and needs to express who you actually are. And if you try to do something else, like build an entire, you know, story about a completely different topic or try to impose it on people, it's never going to work. It will never feel authentic, and it will never drive the change that you want to see. So, that would be my last.
Brilliant. So we'll now move to a bit of a general Q&A. So this is your chance to grill or challenge or just ask a comment or question to any of the panelists. I'll take them in groups, and then we'll direct them to the sort of relevant person. But in a spirit of psychological safety, we're all friends, family here. Ask away whatever you feel like asking. So go straight over here. You could just introduce a bit about you and then your point. I think we've got... Are we going to do a roving mic? Yeah, we are.
This one works.
Does that work?
If you want to do roving mic, I can do panel.
Yeah, I'll do that.
You probably don't need one.
I'm Jane from City to Sea. I have the pleasure of working with Hetty. My question is around diversity and purpose. Like, we talk about purpose like an organisation is a big thing and we all have the same purpose. But actually an organisation is full of loads of people, diverse people, who might not agree with your purpose, but you want in your organisation. So I'm just interested in where you might have come across that and how you've managed it.
Brilliant, fantastic question about diversity and purpose. We've got another question over here.
Just going back to the earlier point about SMEs and how we manage it. I think what I would love to hear from the panel is kind of ways that you have actually implemented, like strategic ways that you've implemented embedding purpose with your teams and what that looks like. I had a great conversation with Lewis at lunch about how his team are encouraged on Fridays to go to a gallery or to have some kind of cultural experience of their own that they can come back and talk to the team about as a way to kind of be more creative and sort of foster that side of them personally. And that's awesome, and that's like a really clear way to do that. So I was wondering if anyone else had any more ideas about ways they can do that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for the big up. I did not pay for that at all. One more from this round. Yeah, sorry.
Did somebody else have their hand up before me?
Yeah. Did you have your hand up? No?
I was just going to... I'm really interested in your point around authenticity and how you manage that. I advise quite a lot of different organisations, and the larger ones I find really struggle with the authentic nature of it. So being able to actually practice what people preach, because they're very good at repeating what the key messages are, but not necessarily embedding that within their other behaviours. And I just wanted to know what some tactics were around that, because I find that a lot, not in small companies at all, actually, because they're mostly founder-led, but in large companies for sure.
Some excellent questions. Bola, maybe you can tackle the diversity and purpose question in a partnership. you know, got lots of different opinions as well, I can imagine. How have you navigated that, and how do you kind of reconcile those two?
Sorry, I feel as though I need to think about this one. So it is a broad church, to be honest, and that's why I kind of go back to that head, hard pocket. There is generally always a reason or a driver that you can align to most people, I would say. It kind of takes me back to, you know, the early 2000s when we were trying to talk about climate change. Now no one even, you know, blinks an eyelid at the fact that climate change is a business issue. Of course it is. But 20 years ago, we were having very different conversations. And actually, you know, that's when we started talking about head, heart, pocket, because we realized that even though everyone's going to have a very different view of something that at the time was controversial, there was always there needed to be a way that made it relevant to them. And if, again, you know, we had lots of the hearts, they were on board. And we tend to kind of think that, you know, that's who we need in organizations. That's why I was saying you need to understand why, you know. And so for me anyway, when I have people who push back on D&I, for example, I always kind of say to myself, I haven't made the right argument with them yet. And I need to figure out what that right argument is. So do I need to figure out who their clients are? And therefore what their clients are doing, and then align that with what we're doing? Do I need to think about the diversity of their team, or the lack of diversity in their team? And so I don't think you can get everyone to understand things the way you understand things, but I see my job as getting everyone to understand the value of what I do in a way that delivers value for them. So.
And, you know, sort of, Beth, you know, similar question to you, kind of, in the work that you've done, how have you kind of reconciled maybe conflicting opinions on purpose, on inclusion? Doesn't work. You can hear what I'm saying anyway. Yeah, do you want to go on to the question?
Yeah, I think being comfortable in discomfort and having the conversation actually is a win. You know, the fact that the dialogue is there and the conversations are happening for me is good, because it just shows that people are willing to get uncomfortable and recognise that, you know, more diversity of voice and opinion is needed. Practically to the question around like how are we actually doing this? Like examples that I've seen. So very practical stuff around data. So if a company's out there with a sustainability report, talking a good game, that's their light side metrics. If you then look at their dark side metrics, and so, you know, you're off there talking about all these great programs for women's empowerment, what does your equal pay audit say? How many sexual harassment complaints have been brought against you? How many whistleblowing instances are there? This is publicly available information if you know where to look. And we're in an age now with technical evolution that if you say one thing in your corporate governance report in the UK Companies Act, or whatever the equivalent is in your given nation, then you're saying something else in your sustainability report, and you're saying something else again in your PR disclosure, and your CEO's on record out there in the ether somewhere. You're at the stage now where, you know, the bots are coming for us, everyone. You know, like these AI engines will be able to really starkly take your dirty laundry and shake it in front of your face. And it's not an age where these conversations can sit in a marketing team anymore. You know, there's definitely a role for communications to play in this. And they're almost, you know, the front line of that voice of purpose within an organisation. But the HR department, in particular, how they bring that to life, how they hold the business to account for how they show up behaviourally. The finance department, in those tensions around what you're investing in and what you're not, what you're sacrificing, the things that you're turning down. Whilst I was off having these nice kind of purpose-led think tank discussions, the business that I was in at the time were also making decisions about products and services that they were going to stop selling. And it was a partnership structure. And so one set of the partnership took very purpose-led decisions. They started turning down business. Another part of the partnership, which was struggling and not doing so well in their kind of bottom line in their revenue targets, picked up that bit of business. And it was payday loan. It was auditing for payday loan companies at the time. They picked up the other part of the business that the purpose-led decision had chosen a subset of partners to say no to. And so the cumulative whole of the company was still doing that work, and yet there was a tipping point of very, very purpose-led leaders that were trying to drive really thoughtful decision-making. So how do you reconcile that? How do you call that out? Well, it starts with conversation. You invite in the discussion. You have that tension in the partnership dialogue. You call out this stuff when it happens, and quite often a lot of this stuff is happening internally, or it's happening under NDA and whatever guise it might be happening in. That example I shared is a publicly available example, by the way, just to be kind of super clear about that. The risk in that is that others can't always learn from it either, right? Which is why conversations like this it's important.
Brilliant. Will.
Sorry, Lewis.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, I just want to go back on that because I think the bit that is really difficult in organisations, but it's really important is finding that safe space to have those conversations. Because we do, especially when it comes to, so diversity and inclusion, I think, is one of those areas where people really struggle to have an open conversation about the things that they don't quite agree with. And one of the things that I've actually found has been helpful is encouraging more peer-to-peer conversations rather than, for example, you being the practitioner, in my case, trying to have those conversations. So, for example, we're doing some leadership series with partners, practice group by practice group. So you're talking about 60 partners. And intentionally, I've taken myself out of those conversations. We've taken the HR person out. We've taken their ops director out. It is literally just a room full of partners. We've mixed them up so we know that we've got some real advocates in there, some real people who haven't quite yet come to the front of that conversation. And an independent facilitator. And we've done that on purpose so that they have the safety in that space to have those conversations, but also to know that they can challenge each other. And actually that's working really well.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of power of constructive debate. Will, what creative ways do you have in your team to embed purpose or your value? Is that one of your team members there?
No.
Oh, okay.
That was where the question came from.
Oh, yeah. What creative ways do you come up with?
I guess before I go into that, Bola, I definitely disagree with you about it gets easier as you're bigger. I know you said you don't think it does, but the difference between a startup, and I don't know how many there are in the room, where to a scale up to a profitable growth is enormous in having that bandwidth. When you're a startup and you're fighting, this sale might be the difference between you losing the business, maybe even losing your house. I promise you to reassure you, it does get easier. We've gone through the startup, now we're in the kind of scale up, and it's a bit easier. But the way I found the values piece is partly by example. And I think when we're really small, it is, you as a leader have to live that by example and then hire by that. And where I've made bad hires, it is where I've just gone for people who look so glossy on paper and they look so capable and they've done such brilliant things in different types of organizations, probably that don't even look our size, but they haven't had our values. And the most recent example of that is we're currently 45 people, and I think the theory goes that when you're up to about 50, the founder can have that kind of visibility. They know and talk to everyone. And as soon as you break through that, you're reliant on deputies and people very close to you to kind of continue that value piece and mission. And we just kind of broke through that. I made the fatal error of hiring this superstar person at great expense, but I missed out on the values piece. And I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. My spider senses were tingling. But unfortunately, I went ahead, and that set us back a little bit. So hiring, I think, is the number one. We will never miss that again. And then just visibility, and then our close team living it and really living it and visibly living it. The piece that I love that I think works for us is care and candor. I think I didn't make that up. It's some famous thing. But we really do care for each other, and we visibly show it. But equally, we are very open and honest. We need to perform well. So if we're very open in the moment feedback, but we do it with care. We want people to succeed. And that includes putting them on a development plan or whatever it might be. It's done with care, and the will to succeed and keep that person in the business successfully. But Care and Candor has been just fabulous for us.
Thank you very much. And just to tackle the question about authenticity, I mean, Hetty and Laura, do you think actually authenticity is much harder with this agenda in small organisations, in bigger organisations compared to the smaller ones? And what tips do you have?
I've got one here. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I can't actually speak from experience of being in larger organisations in this role, but so what can I speak to? I think actually, maybe slightly going back a step, what I can speak to is even though one can have a clear purpose, actually there's a lot between where different roles are in the organisation and achieving that purpose. And I think it's important to think about, is it purpose at any expense? And when things are under pressure, and in a small organisation like we are with funding, where every funding bid makes a huge difference, what gets left behind when you're still aiming for the purpose that you're aiming for, but what are the things which fray at the edges? And to help, I think, with cohesion and unifying people to have a wholesome achievement of purpose. Transparency, is important, and we're on a journey with that at the moment. We've a new CEO, and she's being much more transparent about actually where we are financially, and suddenly our performance targets are much more prominent and rigid and talked about, and that's a huge shift for us. It's an important shift, but we're going through a transition and it's not comfortable. And but transparency at the end of the day is a bedrock, and it's important. And we have lunch and learns where people share really interesting topics. Our policy and media manager the other day did a lunch and learn on Israel-Palestine crisis, and that was really interesting. And a chance for people just to show up as themselves and have a safe and honest conversation about that. We have brilliant stand-ups. Sometimes they're like a comedy club. They're great, aren't they, Jane? They're just really fun. People are candid and honest about who they are, if they had a late night or, something's difficult. So that's really nice to be able to lean into that, I think, and have that trust. And we have shared experiences like our development week, where we learn together, and people at different levels of the organisation lead workshops and tell everyone else about what they're up to, the plans. And of course we have the time and nature that I talked about earlier, where we do ridiculous things together and laugh lots about it for the next year.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
I guess the question was why are larger organizations struggling with authenticity? And I think the honest answer is because it's really hard to embed purpose. That's the only reason. Couple of tips for how you can maybe strive for authenticity, because I guess you can never be super perfect in terms of that. It all comes down to the robustness of your purpose. So a purpose statement needs to be not lofty but measurable, and has to be anchored in impact, and you need to have the data to prove your impact. If it's just a statement that the PR team came up with, you probably can't measure it, and you probably can't use it as a hiring tool. So I think it all comes down to the robustness of your strategy and how well that is being implemented. But yeah, it's probably a journey for most organizations for how to do this stuff well.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Now we are now at the end. I'm going to do two things. One, I just want to ask a quick, literally 5 seconds from each and every one of you, one top thing to leave with everyone in terms of embedding purpose and empowering DEI. 5 seconds, quick, what word would you say, or words? Go for it, Beth.
I'm going to use the word accountability mechanism, and just ask that each of you think about and reflect on one person, either somebody that you've met today or somebody in your circle of trust that you can talk to about your purpose, and then ask them to hold you to account, and that might be taking you for a coffee in a month's time and picking up the conversation again, or just building, sticking a post-it note saying "Be kind" on your laptop.
5 seconds.
5 seconds. Done.
Done. Right.
So I think mine is, I'm going to go back to the why. Why not start finish where I started. So really think about who or what your organisation is trying to do and why you're trying to do it. Just start there and really delve into that and lean into it.
Perfect.
Unsurprising, but keep talking about intentional kindness.
Brilliant. Perfect. Eva, 2 seconds. Will?
Just visibly live your values every day. Consistency.
Be resilient. Purpose is like an onion. You need to peel it over and over again to get to the actual impact that you can create.
I'm going to say it makes you cry. Hope it doesn't do that. But on that, just very quickly, show of hands, who thinks after listening to each other today, you feel more confident about embedding all of this in your organizations? Hands up, show of hands. Less confident or daunted? No? Good. That was a success. Well, look, huge well done. This is a massive agenda. It's useful to chunk it down sometimes and also just connect and have a space where we can talk about it. I'm sure we'll be able to have a chat in the break and in a networking afterwards. The next session, I think, is about the C-suite. I can't remember the exact title, but that starts at 4 o'clock. But feel free to kind of approach everyone and continue the conversation. Thanks very much, everyone.